My stepdaughter looked me in the eye and said, "The best gift you can give me is not coming to my wedding. You're not my real mom, you're just her." My husband said nothing, and for once neither did I. After I sold the house and disappeared from their lives, what I left behind on that empty kitchen counter changed everything. Hello, and thank you for being here. If this story resonates with you, show some love by liking and subscribing. It helps us keep bringing you these powerful narratives. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you right now? Also, a quick note, some elements have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the truths we're exploring, those are very, very real. My name is Diane Bennett. I'm 60 years old. For 16 years, I was a stepmother. That's the short version. The long version is more complicated, like most things worth talking about. I met Edward Bennett at a charity fundraiser in Atlanta 16 years ago. One of those spring evenings in Georgia when the air smells like magnolia and possibility. Edward was standing by the silent auction tables, looking lost. I made a joke about the artwork. He laughed. That was the beginning. Edward was 46, a widower. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving him with a teenage daughter named Olivia. She was 14 when she lost her mother, an age when girls need their mothers most. Edward didn't mention her right away. We just talked. Easy things. Art traffic, the challenge of finding good peaches at the grocery store. On our third date, he told me about Olivia carefully, like he was handling something fragile. "I have a daughter. She's 16. It's been hard for her." Such small words for such big grief. We dated for a year before he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. I'd been married before briefly in my 20s. That one ended quietly. I never had children from that marriage. I'd made peace with it, or so I thought. When I moved into Edward's house in Buckhead, a beautiful colonial with a wide front porch and oak trees, I understood I was entering a life already in progress. Olivia was 17 by then, a high school senior. She looked so much like Edward, same dark hair, same serious eyes. But she had her mother's smile, I was told. I never saw much of it those first few years. The early days were hard. Not dramatic, just hard. Olivia wasn't cruel, but she wasn't warm either. She was polite in the way teenagers are when they've been raised right, but don't particularly like you. She'd say good morning if we passed in the hallway. She'd answer if I asked about her day. But there was always a wall. I didn't try to climb it. I didn't sit her down for heart-to-hearts or call myself mom or suggest shopping trips like in the movies. You can't force grief into a timeline, so I just showed up. I packed lunches. I drove her to school when Edward traveled for work. I asked about her math test and didn't push when she gave one-word answers. Edward appreciated it in his way. "You're good with her," he'd say, kissing my forehead before bed. But Edward was good at appreciating things from a distance. He worked long hours at his consulting firm. He traveled twice a month. When he was home, he was tired. Grief exhausts people in ways they don't always recognize. By the end of the third year, something shifted. Olivia started lingering in the kitchen while I cooked dinner. She'd tell me about a fight with a friend or a teacher she didn't like. Small things. Once she fell asleep on the couch during a movie and I covered her with a blanket. When Edward came home, he smiled. "She trusts you," he whispered. I wanted to believe him. Those first 3 years, I thought I was building something. I thought love and patience were investments that mattered. I thought if I just kept showing up, kept being steady, kept choosing kindness even when it wasn't returned, it would mean something in the end. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what the next 13 years looked like. Let me show you exactly what I gave and what I thought I was building. Because you need to understand the foundation before you understand how completely it crumbled. 13 years. If you're keeping track, that's 156 months. 4,745 days. But numbers don't tell you what those days actually felt like. Olivia chose Emory University here in Atlanta, $48,000 a year for tuition. I didn't blink. This was what parents did, wasn't it? Edward looked relieved when I said I'd handle it. Olivia decided the dorms were too noisy. She needed her own place to focus. We found her an apartment in Virginia Highland, $1,500 a month. I furnished it. She said the couch wasn't her style. We returned it. Got a different one. When she turned 20, I bought her a car, a Honda Accord, reliable and safe, $35,000. Edward gave her a card. I gave her independence. Her junior year, she studied abroad in Florence. $18,000 for the program, not counting the weekend trips to Paris and Barcelona that showed up on the credit card I'd given her for emergencies. I paid them without comment. After graduation, Olivia wanted to start a business, a subscription box service for Southern goods. It sounded charming. I invested $60,000. The business closed in 6 months. She cried on my couch for 2 hours, and I held her hand and told her failure was part of learning. Then I quietly paid off the warehouse lease and the remaining debts, another $15,000. She never asked how I managed it. Those years were full of small crises, a car accident, medical bills, first month's rent every time she moved, which was often, 4 apartments in 5 years. Every time I showed up with boxes and patients, at 2 in the morning when her boyfriend ended things over text. At the hospital, when she thought she had appendicitis, it was gas, but the fear felt real. At Sunday dinners, when she and Edward argued politics, and I smoothed things over so we could finish the meal. She went through 3 jobs in 4 years: marketing coordinator, event planner, social media manager. None of them felt right, she said. She was still figuring out her path. I understood. I'd been young once, too, though my 20s looked different. I'd worked 2 jobs to pay off student loans. I didn't mention that. Edward would say, "You're so good with her, Diane." He meant it as a compliment, but I noticed he said it from the doorway, never from beside me. He provided the salary. I provided everything else. The time. The patience. The 3 a.m. phone calls. Something changed around the time Olivia turned 26. Small shifts. She'd forget to call on my birthday. She'd make plans with Edward, but not invite me. She started spending more time with Janet Sullivan, Edward's sister, who'd never particularly liked me. Janet had opinions about how I wasn't really family the way Edward's late wife had been. I'd ignored it for years, but I noticed Olivia listening. Still, when Olivia called, I answered. When she needed money for a security deposit or a car repair or a bill she couldn't cover, I sent it. I kept a folder on my computer, receipts, bank transfers, statements. Not because I planned to use them. I kept them because I'm a planner. I balance checkbooks. I save receipts. That's what responsible adults do. I just never imagined those records would become evidence. 2 months before everything fell apart, Olivia got engaged. She called me first before Edward, her voice bright with joy. "Diane," he proposed. "Kevin proposed." I was folding laundry when my phone rang. I sat down on the bed and listened to her describe the restaurant The Ring the way he'd gotten down on one knee. She sounded like a girl again, breathless and hopeful. It made my chest tight in a good way. Kevin was 30, a software engineer at a tech company in Midtown. I'd met him a handful of times over the 8 months they'd been dating. He was polite, quiet in the way some men are when they're observant rather than shy. He opened doors. He listened when Olivia talked. He seemed steady. I liked him. The wedding was set for late September. They'd found a venue in the Blue Ridge Mountains about 2 hours north of Atlanta. 200 guests. A ceremony overlooking the valley reception in a restored barn with string lights and mountain views. Olivia showed me pictures on her phone. It looked like something out of a magazine. We met with the wedding planner the following week, a woman named Christine with a leather portfolio and a calm manner. She walked us through the numbers. The venue alone was $85,000. Then there was the catering, the imported flowers, the string quartet, the photographer. The numbers climbed quickly. Edward cleared his throat. "So how much should we contribute?" I looked at Olivia's face. She was trying not to look anxious, but I could see it. Kevin's family didn't have this kind of money. His father was a high school teacher, his mother a nurse. Good people, modest means. "I'll handle it," I said. "All of it." Edward turned to me. "Diane, it's what mothers do," I said. "Even stepmothers." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. She stood up and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. "You're the best," she said. "Kevin's family could never afford something like this. This means everything." Edward squeezed my hand across the table. He didn't touch me often anymore. For a moment, sitting in that office with Christine flipping through vendor catalogs, I felt like we were a family, a real one. The next few weeks were full of appointments. Cake tastings, flower arrangements, invitation designs. I went to all of them. Olivia wanted my opinion on everything. Should the napkins be ivory or champagne? Did I think the calligraphy was too formal? I felt useful, needed. Then one afternoon at the florist, I suggested adding some wildflowers to the orchid arrangements. Something local, I said. A touch of the mountains. Olivia glanced at Christine, then back at me. Diane, no offense, but wildflowers would look cheap. This isn't a barn wedding. I thought the reception was in a barn, I said, trying to keep it light. A restored barn, Olivia corrected. There's a difference. Christine looked uncomfortable. Kevin, who'd come along, studied his phone. Of course, I said. You're right. Olivia went back to the orchids. I stood there holding my purse and feeling something shift in the room. Something small. Something I couldn't quite name. Later in the car, Edward said Olivia was just stressed. Weddings did that to people. I nodded and looked out the window at the traffic on Peachtree Street and told myself he was right. I told myself a lot of things back then that turned out not to be true. 5 weeks before the wedding, we gathered to finalize seating arrangements. It should have been simple. Who sits where, who gets placed, next to whom, the small politics of a large wedding. We'd spread the charts across the coffee table in the living room, printed spreadsheets with little boxes, representing tables' names typed in neat rows. Olivia had color-coded them. Pink for her side, blue for Kevin's, yellow for mutual friends. Edward sat in his usual chair by the window. Kevin was on the couch next to Olivia, laptop open, cross-referencing the guest list. I was on the love seat with a pen making notes. It felt domestic. Normal. The four of us working together on something that mattered. Olivia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and smiled. "It's Uncle Timothy," she said, and before anyone could respond, she'd tapped the speaker button and set the phone on the coffee table between us. "Livy." The voice was warm Southern, a little rough around the edges. Uncle Timothy. I'd met him twice, once at our wedding, once at a family reunion 3 years ago. He was Edward's late wife's brother, lived somewhere outside Knoxville. He'd been kind to me both times in that polite but distant way people are when they're not quite sure what to make of you. Uncle T. Olivia's whole face lit up. "How are you?" "Good, honey, real good. I'm calling about the wedding. Got my flight booked, coming in the Friday before. Wouldn't miss it for the world." "I'm so glad," Olivia said, and I could hear the emotion in her voice. "It means so much that you'll be there. Your mama would be so proud of you, sweetheart." Timothy's voice got softer. "Wish she could see this. See you all grown up marrying a good man." Olivia's eyes filled. "I know. I wish she could be here too." There was a pause, and then Timothy said something that made the air in the room change. "I'm just so glad you're keeping it family live. No outsiders, just the people who really matter. Your mom would have wanted that, real family only." Olivia laughed, actually laughed. "I know, right? That's exactly how I feel, just real family." I froze. The pen in my hand stopped moving. I looked up from the seating chart and stared at Olivia, waiting for her to correct him, to explain, to say something that would make those words mean something different than what they sounded like. She didn't. I turned to Edward. He was staring at the spreadsheet in his lap like it contained the secrets of the universe. His jaw was tight. He wouldn't look up. Wouldn't look at me. Kevin shifted on the couch, uncomfortable. He glanced at Olivia, then at me, then down at his hands. "Olivia," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady. "What does your uncle mean by that?" She looked startled, like she'd forgotten I was in the room. "Oh, nothing. He's just Uncle T. I'll call you back later, okay?" "Sure thing, honey. Love you." "Love you too." She ended the call and picked up her phone, not meeting my eyes. "Olivia," I said again, "what did your uncle mean?" "No outsiders." She sighed, annoyed. "Diane, it's not a big deal. Can we not do this right now? We have to finish the seating chart." I'd like to understand what he meant. "He's just excited about the wedding," she said, her tone clipped. "That's all." I looked at Edward again. He was still studying that spreadsheet. still silent. "Edward?" I said. He finally looked up, but not at me, at Olivia. Kevin was very carefully examining his fingernails. "Olivia," I said a third time, "please explain to me what your uncle meant." She looked at Kevin. Kevin looked at his hands. She looked at her father. Edward finally looked up, but not at me, at her. Then Olivia looked at me, and I saw it in her eyes before she even spoke. A decision, a wall going up, something cold and final. Everything was about to change. Olivia sighed like I was being difficult. "Diane, it's not a big deal. Can we not do this right now? We still have to finish the seating chart." I'd like to understand what your uncle meant," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's all." She set her phone down on the coffee table harder than necessary. "Fine. You want to know Uncle Timothy, and I talked about the wedding, about keeping it intimate, close family only. I am family. You're my stepmom." The word hung in the air between us. Stepmom. Not mom, not family. Stepmom. "Olivia," I said slowly, "what are you saying?" She looked at Kevin, then at Edward, then back at me. When she spoke again, her voice was firm like she'd rehearsed this. "I don't want you at the wedding, Diane." The room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "What?" "This is my day," she said. "Mine and Kevin's. It's about honoring my real mom, my mother, the woman who gave birth to me, who raised me until I was 14. I need this day to be about her memory." I couldn't breathe properly. "Olivia, having you there sitting in the front row like you're my mother, it doesn't feel right. It feels false. My mom passed away. You're not her. You never were. You're Diane. You've been nice. You've helped me. But let's be honest about what this is." She gestured vaguely between us. "You're not my mom. You never were." Kevin spoke quietly, almost desperately. "Vicky, maybe we should talk about this, Lay." She ignored him completely, her eyes locked on mine. "I need this day to be authentic. I need to honor her, and I can't do that if you're sitting there pretending to be something you're not." My mouth was dry. "Olivia, I'm paying for this wedding." "I know," she said, and she actually sounded annoyed that I'd brought it up. "And I appreciate it, I really do. But this isn't about money. This is about what's right for me. If you don't want to pay anymore, that's fine. Kevin and I will figure something out." I looked at Edward. He was still in his chair by the window, hands gripping the armrests, staring at nothing. "Edward," I said. He finally spoke, but he wouldn't look at me. "Diane, she's emotional. Wedding planning is stressful. Did you know about this?" Silence. "Edward, did you know she was going to say this to me?" He looked at Olivia instead of me. "She's my daughter. This day is important to her." That wasn't an answer. It was an answer. "She's your daughter," I repeated. "And what am I?" "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said quietly. Kevin stood up abruptly. "We should go. Vicky, let's just go." Olivia started gathering her papers, her phone, her color-coded spreadsheets. She moved quickly, efficiently, like she wanted to be gone before I could say anything else. At the door, she turned back. "Thanks for understanding, Diane. You're a good person. This doesn't change anything between us. I still care about you. But this day is special, and I need it to be right." Then they were gone. The front door closed. I heard Kevin's car start in the driveway, heard the sound fade down the street, and I was alone, with my husband, who had said nothing to defend me, who had known this was coming, who had sat there and let his daughter tell me I wasn't family that I'd been pretending for 16 years, that I didn't belong, who looked at me now with something that might have been pity or might have been relief that it was finally out in the open. "Diane," he started. I held up my hand. "Don't." I stood up, walked upstairs, closed the door to my office, and picked up my phone. I had 3 calls to make. The house was silent for a long time after they left. Edward and I sat in the living room, neither of us moving. The seating charts were still spread across the coffee table. The color-coded spreadsheets, the neat little boxes with names inside, all of it suddenly meaningless. I could hear the clock on the mantel ticking, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, my own breath careful and controlled. Finally, I spoke. "You knew." Edward shifted in his chair. "She mentioned she was struggling with, and you said nothing to me, nothing." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was uncomfortable. "What did you want me to say? She's grieving her mother." "She lost her mother 16 years ago," I said. "I've been here for all 16 of those years." "You've been her stepmother." Edward said, his voice harder now. "That's different." "Different how?" "You're not her mother, Diane." He was looking at me now, really looking at me for the first time since Olivia had spoken. "You never will be." The words landed like stones. "Maybe we've all been pretending," he continued. "Pretending this was something it wasn't. Pretending it meant more than it did." I felt something crack inside my chest. "Did you agree with her about me not coming to the wedding?" He looked away again, stared at those damn seating charts. "Edward, answer me." "I think," he said slowly, carefully, "we should respect her wishes. It's her day." "And our marriage." "What about that? Don't be dramatic. It's one day." "This isn't about one day," I said. "This is about 16 years. He stood up, moved to the window, his back to me. "She doesn't owe you anything. You chose to help her. That was your choice, your decision. Nobody forced you. I helped her because I thought I was her family." "You were her father's wife," he said to the window. "That's not the same thing." The past tense registered slowly. Were, not are. Were. "Is that how you see me?" I asked. "After 14 years of marriage, after 16 years with Olivia, I'm just your wife, not family." He didn't answer. "Edward, look at me." He turned and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not anger, not guilt, just weariness. Like I was an obligation he was tired of carrying. "This is hard for everyone," he said quietly. "Can't you just let it go? For Olivia's sake, she's getting married. She's emotional. It's not personal." "How is this not personal?" "You're making it bigger than it needs to be." I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but my voice was clear. "Your daughter just told me I don't belong in this family. And you stood there and let her. You agreed with her. You chose her over me. She's my daughter." Edward said. Like that explained everything. Like that justified everything. "And what am I? Silence?" "What am I, Edward?" "You're my wife," he said finally. "But she's my daughter. There's no choice here. There was never a choice." Something in his tone told me this wasn't new. This was how he'd always seen it. I'd just been too busy showing up, being useful, playing the role to notice. I nodded slowly. "You're right. There's no choice." I walked toward the stairs. "Diane, where are you going?" "To my office," I said, without turning around. "We need to talk about this." "No," I said. "We really don't." I climbed the stairs, walked into my office, and closed the door. Then I sat down at my desk, picked up my phone, and started making calls. The first call was to Susan Bradley. Susan had been my attorney for 20 years, but she was more than that. We'd met at a professional women's luncheon back when I still worked in finance before I'd married Edward. She'd handled my first home purchase, my previous divorce, my estate planning. I trusted her completely. It was 9 o'clock at night. She answered on the second ring. "Diane, everything okay?" I told her what had happened, calmly, methodically, Olivia's words, Edward's silence, the 16 years that apparently meant nothing. Susan didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause, and then she said quietly, "I'm so sorry. What do you want to do?" "I want to know my options, the house, assets, everything." "The house, you owned it before the marriage. 5 years before. My name is on the original deed. Edward moved in after the wedding." "Good. Georgia law is clear on separate property. We have options." Papers rustled in the background. "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 sharp? We'll go through everything." "I'll be there. Diane." Her voice softened. I'm going to take care of this. You're going to be okay. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I appreciated the certainty in her voice. The second call was to Dennis Clark. Dennis had managed my investments for 15 years. Conservative portfolios, retirement accounts, the inheritance from my father. He was good at his job and discreet. Dennis, I need a full accounting. Everything separate. What's mine? What's his? What's joint? Diane, what's going on? My marriage is ending. I need to protect myself. A long pause. I'll pull everything tonight. But Diane, there's something you should probably know. My stomach tightened. What? I'd rather show you the paperwork. Can you come by tomorrow after you see Susan? Tell me now. Tomorrow is better. But let's just say, Edward's been moving money around. I noticed it about 6 months ago. I should have said something then. 6 months. Around the time Olivia started pulling away. What kind of moving? Tomorrow, Dennis said firmly. I'll have everything ready. 10:30. I'll be there. After I hung up, I sat in the dark office for a long time thinking about what Edward might have been planning, how long he'd been preparing to push me out. The third call I made at 7 the next morning. Marcus Thompson had sold me this house 21 years ago, back when I was single and building my career. We'd stayed in touch, occasional lunches, holiday cards. He'd celebrated with me when I'd married Edward, sent flowers when I'd mentioned Olivia's graduation. Marcus, I need to sell, fast. Your house. He sounded stunned. Diane, that place is worth $2.7 million in this market. Easy. I know. How quickly can we move? If you're serious, I can have photographers out today, listed by Friday. But Diane, what's happening? I'm leaving Marcus. I need to move quickly. Okay. His voice shifted, became businesslike. Okay. I can do this. Price it at 2.65 slight under market for speed. Professional photos, virtual tour, I'll push my entire network. We could have offers by next week. Do it, Diane, he said carefully. Are you sure completely? By the time I hung up, the sun was rising. I could see light creeping across the oak trees in the yard, the ones that had been there long before Edward, long before Olivia, long before any of this. Downstairs, the house was silent. Edward was still asleep, or pretending to be, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Marcus called me back that afternoon and asked if we could meet. Not at the house. Somewhere neutral. We agreed on a coffee shop in Midtown, a quiet place I'd never been to with Edward or Olivia. A place that was just mine. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw me, and something in his expression made me sit down carefully, like I was bracing for bad news. Before we move forward, he said, I need to tell you something. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. All right. He looked down at his own cup, then back at me. I was a stepfather once, for 12 years. The words hit differently than I expected. I didn't know that. Most people don't. It's not something I talk about. He took a breath. My ex-wife had a son from her first marriage, Brian. He was 7 when I met him. Sweet kid. Loved baseball, hated broccoli, wanted to be an astronaut. I stayed quiet, letting him tell it. I raised him. Every game, every parent-teacher conference, every midnight emergency room visit, when he had the flu or broke his arm falling off his bike. I taught him to drive. I helped him apply to colleges. I paid for those colleges. His voice stayed even, but I could hear the weight under it. When he was 19, home on winter break, he told me he didn't want me at his graduation. Said I wasn't his real father. Said I should stop pretending I was. My throat tightened. I tried to talk to my wife about it. She said Brian was just figuring out his identity, that I should give him space, that it wasn't personal. Marcus looked at me directly now, but it was personal. And when I pushed back, when I said I'd earned the right to be at that graduation, she chose him. Filed for divorce 3 months later. Marcus, I'm so sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. It destroyed me at the time. Lost the house, most of my savings, my sense of who I was. Took me years to rebuild. He paused. But it taught me something important. It taught me who I was without them, and that was the best lesson I ever learned. When you said you were leaving, he continued, when you said you needed to move quickly, I understood exactly why, not just professionally, personally. Something eased in my chest. Someone understood, really understood. I'm going to help you do this right, Marcus said. Price it at $2.65 million. Slightly under market, but not so low it looks desperate. Professional photos tomorrow. I know a guy, he's excellent. We'll list Friday. I'll push every contact I have. Cash buyers get priority because they close faster. How fast are we talking? In this market with a house like yours, 2 weeks if we're lucky. Maybe less. Do it. Diane. He leaned forward. This is going to be brutal. Edward's going to fight it. Olivia's going to panic. You're going to get calls from everyone saying you're being unreasonable. I know. I need you to be ready for that. I am. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, then let's do this. We talked logistics for another half hour. Staging, photography, timing, marketing strategy. Marcus had a plan for everything. Watching him work, I realized this was more than just a sale to him. This was him doing for me what no one had done for him. Before we parted in the parking lot, Marcus asked me one question. Are you absolutely sure about this? I didn't hesitate. Completely. While Marcus worked on the house, I worked on something else. The binder. I'd been compiling records for days, bank statements going back 16 years, receipts I'd saved in labeled folders, credit card bills, tuition payments, apartment deposits, every check I'd written, every transfer I'd made, every expense that had Olivia's name attached to it. It was meticulous work. Each entry needed a date, an amount, a purpose. I worked late into the nights at my desk in the home office, the only sound the clicking of my keyboard and the occasional creak of the house settling around me. Dennis had sent over the financial reports he'd promised. I had a meeting scheduled with him for the following afternoon, but I wanted to have my own records complete first. I needed to see the full picture myself. I was working on the shared family computer, the one Edward and I both used for household accounts and bills. As I opened a folder to cross-reference some old bank statements, I saw a file I didn't recognize. Draft. Don't send. I stared at it for a moment. Probably something of Edward's. An unfinished email to a client maybe, but curiosity pulled at me. I clicked it open. It was an email, addressed to Edward, from Olivia, dated 3 months ago, never sent, saved in drafts and forgotten. The subject line read, "Need to talk after wedding." I should have closed it, but I didn't. Dad, this is awkward, but I need to ask Diane for a cash gift after the wedding. Maybe $50,000, I'm in a bind financially and Kevin can't know. Once we get through the ceremony and I get the money, I can handle the rest. Can you help me approach her about it? I read it twice, then a third time. $50,000. After the wedding, I wasn't invited to. For debts Kevin didn't know about. My hands were shaking. I picked up my phone and called Dennis. Can you look into Olivia's finances? I asked when he answered. Credit reports, loan accounts, anything you can access legally. Give me an hour, he said. It took him 45 minutes. Olivia had $45,000 in debt. Student loans she'd refinanced at terrible rates. Instead of asking me for help, $22,000. Credit cards maxed out at $15,000. A personal loan for $8,000 from some online lender charging interest rates that should have been illegal. She was living beyond her means. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, weekend trips she posted about online. All of it on borrowed money. All of it carefully hidden from Kevin. And she'd planned to ask me after excluding me from her wedding, after telling me I wasn't family, to write her a check for $50,000 to clean up the mess. My presence wasn't welcome, but my wallet was. I looked at the email again. It was addressed to Edward. He'd known about this, known about her debts, known about her plan to use me for money while shutting me out of her life. 3 months ago, the same time she'd started pulling away, spending more time with Janet Sullivan, building the narrative that I wasn't really family. This had been calculated, all of it. I printed the email, added it to the growing stack of papers on my desk. Then I pulled up her credit report Dennis had sent and printed that too. Evidence. All of it was evidence. I sat back in my chair and looked at the pile of documents. 16 years of giving, $45,000 in lies, one draft email that proved exactly how expendable I was. And for the first time in days, I smiled. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday morning. Marcus had moved fast. Professional photos on Monday, listing live by Monday night sign planted on the lawn by 7 Tuesday morning. I watched from the upstairs window as the installation crew hammered the post into the ground. Bold red letters against white for sale. Marcus Thompson Realty. I was making coffee when Edward came home that evening. I heard his car in the driveway. Heard the door slam harder than usual. Then he was in the kitchen doorway. What the hell is that sign doing on our lawn? I turned from the coffee maker, cup in hand. I'm selling the house. You're what? His face went red. You can't do that. I live here. Not for much longer. I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot, but I didn't flinch. Diane, this is insane. You're overreacting to one argument, to being told I don't matter, to you choosing Olivia over me. This is vindictive. This is clear. I said, you told me we'd been pretending for 16 years. I'm done pretending. He changed tactics, tried guilt. What about our marriage, 14 years, and you're throwing it away? What about it, Edward? His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Not to hit me, Edward wasn't violent, but from frustration, from losing control. Where am I supposed to live? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. You'll figure it out. You and Olivia are family, right? Real family. You'll take care of each other. He pulled out his phone and dialed. I knew who he was calling. Olivia, you need to come over. Now. It's about Diane. She arrived in 40 minutes. I heard her car screech into the driveway, heard her footsteps running up the walk. When she burst through the door, her face was blotchy from crying in the car. Diane, please. She didn't even take off her coat. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was stressed and stupid. You meant it, I said calmly, and I'm respecting that. You wanted me to disappear, so I am. Not like this. Her voice pitched higher, desperate. The wedding is 4 weeks away. The venue, they need final payment next week. That's not my problem anymore. Please. She was crying openly now. Kevin appeared in the doorway behind her, looking helpless. We can fix this. We can talk about it. There's nothing to fix, nothing to talk about. Edward tried again. Diane, be reasonable. I walked past all 3 of them and went upstairs. Into the bedroom Edward and I had shared for 14 years. I locked the door behind me. I heard them arguing downstairs. Olivia's voice rising and falling. Edward's low, angry rumble. Kevin trying unsuccessfully to calm them both down. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited until I heard them leave. Car doors. Engines. Silence. 6 days later, Marcus called. We have a cash offer. His voice was professional but excited. The Petersons. Young couple. $2.7 million. They want to close in 2 weeks. Fast track everything. I stood in the living room. Edward had moved to a hotel 2 days after the sign went up and looked around at the space I'd lived in for so long. Accept it, I said. You're sure there might be other offers? I'm sure. Accept it. There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice came back warm. Okay, I'll draw up the paperwork. Diane, you're really doing this. Yes, I said. I really am. Kevin showed up alone 10 days after the house went under contract. Edward and Olivia had driven to Lenox Square that morning for her final dress fitting. I'd stayed behind packing dishes into boxes labeled donate and storage. When the doorbell rang, Kevin stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. He looked older than 30, tired. Can we talk? He asked. Just the 2 of us. I stepped aside and let him in. The living room was half empty now, furniture rearranged to stage the house for showings. I poured him coffee. He didn't drink it. I was there, he said finally. When Olivia said those things, I heard all of it. I sat across from him and waited. I understand why you're doing this, he continued, and I don't blame you. Then why are you here, Kevin? He exhaled slowly like a man bracing for impact. Because I've been seeing things I didn't want to see, the way she talks about people. Waiters, cashiers, my younger sister. He paused. I told myself it was stress, or just the way she was raised, but after what she said to you, his voice cracked. I can't pretend anymore. Oh, part of me wants to call off the wedding. I leaned forward. Then why don't you? Because I've invested too much. The words came out bitter. The ring cost me 6 months' salary. We've put down deposits. My parents are flying in from Ohio, and I love her, or I love who I thought she was. He looked at me with desperate eyes. I came here to ask you to reconsider, not for Olivia, for yourself. Don't let her destroy what you've built over 16 years. I set my coffee down carefully. Kevin, she already destroyed it. The house of cards collapsed. I'm just cleaning up the rubble. He flinched. Can I tell you something? I asked gently. Watch how someone treats people who can't do anything for them anymore. That's their real character. Right now, I can't do anything for Olivia, and you're seeing who she becomes when I'm no longer useful. Kevin stared at his untouched coffee. Did I make a mistake? That's not for me to answer, I said, but you already know. He stood slowly like a man carrying weight he couldn't put down. At the door, he turned back one last time. What would you do if you were me? I thought of 16 years, of late-night phone calls and hospital waiting rooms and checks I'd written without asking for anything back. I thought of Edward's silence in the living room and Olivia's voice on speakerphone, just real family. I'd walk away, I said quietly, but I'm not you, and sunk costs are only sunk if you keep sinking. Kevin nodded once and left. I never saw him face to face again. But months later, I came across the wedding photos online someone had tagged Olivia in an album. In every single shot, Kevin looked like a man attending a funeral, not a wedding. 3 days after Kevin's visit, Marcus called. Closing is scheduled for next Thursday, he said. The Petersons are wiring funds tomorrow. You ready? I looked around the house. Boxes everywhere. Walls bare. A marriage ending in real time. Completely ready, I said. And for the first time in 16 years, I meant it. I moved out 3 days before the Petersons took possession of the house. Packing had taken me nearly a week. Not because I had so much. After 16 years, I realized most of what filled that house wasn't mine. The furniture went to a consignment shop in Buckhead. Olivia's childhood things still boxed in the attic I left for Edward to deal with. My personal belongings fit into a storage unit off Howell Mill Road. I'd rented a serviced apartment in Midtown. Month-to-month lease. Small, clean, anonymous. A place to land while I figured out what came next. Edward had moved to a hotel a week earlier. He couldn't bear staying in the house after the sale went through. He'd packed one suitcase and left without a word. I didn't ask where he went. Olivia called constantly. 17 times in 2 weeks. I counted. Voicemails piled up like debris after a storm. Aunt Diane, please, can we just talk? I didn't mean it the way it sounded. What about the venue they need the final payment next week? I didn't answer a single one. On my last night in the house, I sat alone on the kitchen floor. The counters were bare. The walls were blank. The rooms echoed. In front of me sat the binder, black, 3 inches thick, 16 years organized chronologically. I'd spent hours assembling it. Bank statements, credit card bills, wire transfer confirmations, every receipt I could find labeled with dates and amounts, tuition payments to Emory University, rent checks for 5 different apartments, car insurance, medical bills, the business loan I'd covered when her startup failed, plane tickets, groceries, birthday gifts, emergency loans she never paid back, $520,000. I'd printed the email too, the draft she'd left on the shared computer. Dad, can you help me ask Aunt Diane for a cash gift after the wedding? Maybe $50,000 Kevin can't know. And I'd included a timeline, small moments documented. The year she stopped calling me on Mother's Day. The Christmas she didn't come home. The family dinner where she introduced me as Dad's wife instead of her stepmother. At the front of the binder, I placed a letter. I didn't write it in anger. I didn't write it to wound. I wrote it because after 16 years of sacrifice, I wanted her to understand what family really meant. Not the one you're born into, the one you choose, the one you show up for. I sealed the binder and set it on the kitchen counter, right in the center where no one could miss it. Then I walked through the empty house one last time. The living room where we'd argued over seating charts, the dining room where Edward had avoided my eyes, the bedroom where I'd slept alone for the last 2 weeks, the office where I'd made 3 phone calls that changed everything. I locked the front door behind me, dropped the keys into the mailbox for Marcus to retrieve, got into my car, the one thing that was entirely mine, and drove away. I didn't look back, not at the house, not at the neighborhood, not at the life I'd built brick by brick for a family that had never truly been mine. Somewhere in Atlanta, Olivia was probably calling again, leaving another voicemail I'd never listened to. Somewhere Edward was sitting in a hotel room wondering how everything had fallen apart. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about Savannah, about moss-covered oaks and the salt smell of the coast, about a small house I'd seen online with a front porch and room for a garden, about starting over at 60 years old with nothing but a storage unit and a clean conscience. The binder would do its work without me. I'd done mine. 3 days later, the Petersons moved in, and 2 days after that, Edward went back to the house to retrieve something he'd forgotten. He found the binder on the counter, and everything I'd left unsaid finally spoke for itself. My phone started ringing at 6:47 in the morning. I was sitting in the service department with my coffee, watching the sun come up over Midtown. Edward's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. A text came through 30 seconds later, "Call me. Now." I ignored it. At 7:15, Olivia called. I let it go to voicemail. Even through the silence, I could hear her sobbing. At 7:30, Edward called again. This time I answered. "What did you do?" His voice shook. Not with anger, with something worse. "Good morning," I said calmly. "The binder, Diane, got all of it." "Oh, you found it. $520,000. You tracked every single dollar. I told you," I said. "I'm a planner." "This is sick. This is accurate," I interrupted. "That's what it is. Olivia's falling apart. Good, I said quietly. She told me I didn't matter. I showed her I did. The wedding's in 2 weeks. The venue needs... Not my problem anymore, Edward." He hung up. At 8 o'clock, Olivia called. She could barely speak through the tears. "Aunt Diane, please, I'm sorry. I was stupid. I was selfish. I see it now." "You see the receipts," I said. "That's not the same as understanding." "I understand what you did for me now. Everything." "You understand the money," I corrected. "But this was never about money." "I'll pay you back, I swear. I don't know how, but keep your money. Olivia. Spend it on therapy instead. Figure out why you think people are disposable. Please." Her voice cracked. "I'll invite you to the wedding, front row. You can walk me down the aisle." I closed my eyes. "I don't want a pity invitation," I said. "I wanted respect. I wanted to matter. You made it clear I didn't, so now I'm leaving." "It's been 16 years. "Exactly," I said. "It took 16 years for you to show me who you really are. I'm choosing to believe you now." I hung up. For a long moment, I sat in the silence of the empty apartment, the phone in my hand, the coffee going cold, the morning light slanting through unfamiliar windows, and I felt peace. Not victory, not satisfaction, just the quiet certainty of someone who'd finally stopped pretending. Over the next 10 days, I received 43 calls from various family members: Edward, Olivia, Janet Sullivan, Uncle Timothy, friends of Olivia's I'd never even met. I didn't answer a single one. The wedding, I later learned, went forward. They downsized, moved it from the Blue Ridge Mountains to a restaurant in Buckhead. 50 guests instead of 200. Olivia wore the dress she'd tried on that day Kevin came to see me. Edward walked her down the aisle with a frozen smile. Kevin stood at the altar and said his vows. And in every photo I never asked to see but somehow found their way to me. Months later, he looked exactly like I'd told him he would. like a man attending a funeral. 6 months after the wedding, the divorce papers arrived in my mailbox. Edward's attorney had drawn them up efficiently. No drama, no contest. Just the legal dissolution of a marriage that had ended the moment he stayed silent in that living room. I signed them in blue ink and mailed them back the same day. And then I drove to Savannah to look at houses with front porches. If you've made it this far with me, thank you. Truly. Leave a comment, even just a single word, so I know you're still here. Because what comes next isn't easy to talk about. The divorce, the letters. The moment I finally stopped looking back, I need to tell you some names and details have been changed to protect the people involved, but every emotion you're about to hear, I lived it. If you're ready for the rest of my story, stay. If this is where you need to stop, I understand. Boundaries go both ways. Olivia's dream wedding became a nightmare. I didn't witness it firsthand. I didn't need to. The fallout reached me in fragments, voicemails I listened to, once text messages I read, and archived secondhand reports from people who still had my number. The Blue Ridge venue was the first casualty. $85,000 in deposits, non-refundable. Gone. The guest list shrank from 200 to 50. That's all they could afford once Diane's funding disappeared. They moved the ceremony to a small Italian restaurant in Buckhead, a private dining room with exposed brick and string lights. Charming maybe for an anniversary dinner, devastating for a wedding that was supposed to announce Olivia's arrival into adulthood. The string quartet was replaced by an iPod playlist. The imported orchids became grocery store carnations. The professional photographer became Emily with an iPhone. The honeymoon in Bali was quietly canceled. Olivia kept the dress. She'd already paid for that. The voicemails piled up like unpaid bills. Janet Sullivan left 3 in 2 days each, angrier than the last. You vindictive bitch. You destroyed this family over your pride. I deleted them without finishing. Uncle Timothy called once, his voice quiet and ashamed. I didn't know Diane. Olivia never told us you paid for everything. I'm sorry for what I said. I saved that one. Didn't reply, but I saved it. Emily, Olivia's best friend, tried to mediate. Can you two just talk? She's devastated. The wedding's falling apart. I didn't answer. The extended family split. Some blamed me. Some blamed Olivia. Most stayed silent, unsure whose side to take when both stories sounded true. And then Kevin found out about the debt. The wedding budget crisis forced Olivia's hand. She finally confessed $45,000 in credit cards, student loans, personal loans she'd been hiding since before they got engaged. Kevin didn't take it well. I heard about the fight through Emily's voicemail, left in a panic. They almost called it off. Kevin's furious. He said she's been lying to him for months. They didn't call it off. Too late for that. Too many deposits lost. Too much family flying in. Too much pride at stake. But the crack was there, right at the foundation. A week before the wedding, Edward showed up at my apartment. I didn't open the door. I stood on the other side and listened to him talk through 2 inches of wood. 16 years of marriage, Diane. You're throwing it away over one mistake. You threw it away when you chose her over me, I said calmly. I'm just accepting reality. I didn't choose. You stood there and said nothing. That was a choice. He stayed for 10 minutes, tried reasoning, bargaining, guilt. When none of it worked, he left. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late September. 50 guests, a small ceremony. Janet posted photos on Facebook I still had access through a mutual friend's account. Olivia looked beautiful in the dress, but her smile was strained thin, like something held together with wire. Kevin stood beside her in a dark suit, his jaw tight, his eyes somewhere else. In every photo, they looked like strangers performing a script. The comments were polite. Congratulations. Beautiful couple. Wishing you both happiness. No one mentioned the venue change. No one asked about the mother of the bride. I looked at the photos once. Just once. Then I closed Facebook and never looked again. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a small cottage in Savannah. It had a front porch, a garden plot, and oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. The kind of place I'd always wanted but never asked for. I didn't tell Edward where I was going. I didn't tell Olivia. I just went. Edward filed for divorce 6 weeks after the wedding. Susan Bradley called to tell me. I was sitting on the porch of my rented cottage in Savannah, watching the Spanish moss sway in the breeze. He's trying to take control of the narrative, Susan said. Wants it to look like his decision. Let him, I said, as long as the paperwork's clean. It was. The house sale, $2.7 million, was mine. Separate property purchased before the marriage. Georgia law was clear. Edward didn't even try to contest it. The retirement accounts were split. I'd contributed more over the years, so I walked away with 60%. The joint savings were divided down the middle. No alimony, no support, no lingering financial ties. Edward knew better than to fight. He'd seen the binder. He knew what a courtroom would look like. The whole process took 8 months. Efficient, sterile, like dismantling furniture. By March, it was done. In April, Edward sent a letter, 6 pages typed single-spaced. I read it once standing at my kitchen counter with cold coffee. You destroyed our family. Olivia will never forgive you. I wasted 16 years on someone who turned out to be petty and vindictive. You'll die alone, and you'll deserve it. I folded it carefully, put it in a drawer, and never looked at it again. In June, Olivia's letter arrived. 4 pages handwritten in purple ink. The penmanship was shaky, the sentences looping and desperate. Aunt Diane, I don't know how to say this except to just say it. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I didn't understand what I had until it was gone. You gave me everything and I threw it away because I was scared and stupid and pressured by people who didn't matter. I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for what you did for me. I see now what family really means. It's not blood, it's showing up. It's sacrifice. It's love that doesn't ask for anything back. Please come back. I need you. I read it twice. The second time I cried, not because I was tempted to respond, but because 16 years ago those words would have meant everything. Now they were just ink on paper. I didn't write back. Susan came to visit in July. We sat on the porch with iced tea, and she asked the question I knew was coming. They're going through the stages of grief, she said gently. Denial, anger, bargaining. Do you think they'll ever reach acceptance? Maybe, I said, in a few years. Or maybe never. How do you feel? I looked out at the garden I'd started planting. Tomatoes, basil, wildflowers. Things that grew without asking for permission. Better than I have in a decade. Susan smiled. Good. Back in Atlanta, the social circles had split. Some of the women I'd known, the ones who'd been step-parents themselves, or second wives, or quietly undervalued, reached out with quiet solidarity. Others whispered that I was cold, unforgiving, cruel for abandoning a child I'd raised. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. The people who mattered already understood. The divorce was finalized in March. By April, I'd found a house in Savannah, a real one, not a rental. A cottage with a wraparound porch and room for the garden I'd always wanted. By May, I'd started my new life. And somewhere in Atlanta, Edward and Olivia were still trying to understand what had happened. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the tomatoes that needed staking in the book club I'd joined, and the neighbor who'd invited me to a barbecue on Saturday. I was thinking about what it felt like to be seen, to be valued, to matter. For the first time in 16 years, I was thinking about myself. Savannah had everything Atlanta didn't. Quiet, space, permission to start over without explaining myself to people who'd already made up their minds about who was right and who was wrong. I was 61 now. The house I'd bought sat in the historic district tucked between live oaks that dripped Spanish moss, like lace curtains swaying in the coastal breeze. 2 bedrooms more than I needed, but enough for the life I was building. A front porch with a swing where I spent my evenings. A garden plot out back where I planted tomatoes, basil, and wildflowers. The kind of flowers Olivia once said looked cheap. I tended that garden every morning before the heat set in my hands in the dirt, proving to myself that I could grow something that didn't ask for anything but water and sunlight. 15 minutes to Tybee Island, where I walked the beach at sunrise 3 times a week. The ocean had a way of putting things in perspective. 16 years of sacrifice felt small against that endless horizon. The waves came in, went out, and never asked permission. I was learning to do the same. I'd built a life that was entirely mine. Not borrowed, not shared, not contingent on someone else's approval. Tuesdays, I volunteered at the Women's Resource Center downtown teaching financial literacy to women leaving difficult situations, how to open a bank account in your own name, how to build credit from scratch, how to untangle yourself from someone else's money without losing everything you've worked for. I knew that lesson by heart. I'd lived it. The women in my classes looked at me with a mixture of hope and exhaustion I recognized immediately. Sometimes they asked how I'd done it, how I'd walked away after so many years. I told them the truth, one phone call at a time, one boundary at a time, one choice at a time. Wednesdays, I took a yoga class at a studio near Forsyth Park. I wasn't good at it. My balance was terrible, and I couldn't touch my toes without bending my knees. But I liked the way it made me feel grounded present here, in my body instead of in my head replaying conversations that no longer mattered. Thursdays, I painted, watercolors, clumsy amateur joyful, sunsets over the marsh, the live oaks outside my window, the heron I'd seen standing in the shallows near the island. The kind of thing I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when I was busy funding someone else's dreams and managing someone else's crises. The book club met every other Friday at a cafe on Broughton Street. 6 women all over 50, all with stories they didn't share right away. Divorces, losses, second chances. We'd become friends. Real ones. The kind who showed up when you needed them, not because they wanted something from you. Weekends. I wandered the farmer's market on Forsyth Park, bought fresh tomatoes, and Georgia peaches came home and cooked meals for one without feeling lonely. I set the table. I lit a candle. I poured myself a glass of wine and ate slowly, tasting every bite. Marcus visited every 2 or 3 months. He'd drive down from Atlanta and we'd sit on the porch with sweet tea talking about everything and nothing. "You look lighter," he said on his last visit, studying me the way old friends do. "I feel lighter," I said, literally and figuratively. He laughed. "Retirement suits you." "Freedom suits me." We'd become real friends, Marcus and I. 2 people who'd loved stepchildren and lost them. 2 people who'd given everything and been told it wasn't enough. 2 people who'd chosen dignity over being a doormat. We mentored each other in quiet ways, reminded each other that leaving wasn't the same as failing. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop letting people treat you like you don't matter. I didn't think about Edward much anymore. When I did, I felt nothing. Not anger, not regret, not even disappointment. Just distance, like he was a character in a book I'd read years ago and barely remembered. Olivia crossed my mind sometimes. I wondered if she'd learned anything, if her marriage to Kevin was surviving the cracks that had formed before they'd even said their vows, if she'd ever understood what family really meant, not the performance of it, but the reality, the showing up, the seeing someone, the honoring their presence instead of their usefulness. Then I'd remember wondering wasn't my job anymore. One evening in late spring, I sat on the porch with iced tea, watching the sun sink low over the oak trees. From somewhere distant, I could hear the ocean, the rhythmic pull and release, the sound of things letting go. For the first time in 16 years, I wasn't a stepmother. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't anyone's wallet or backup plan or convenient safety net. I was just Diane. And that was more than enough. I'd spent 16 years trying to earn a place in a family that was never going to make room for me. Now I had a place I'd made for myself, a porch swing, a garden, a book club, a beach within walking distance, friendships built on reciprocity, not need. I had a life that asked nothing of me except that I show up for it. And for the first time in a very long time, I was happy. Not the frantic, conditional happiness that comes from being needed, the quiet, steady kind that comes from being whole. Looking back now, I see my story clearly. This isn't just another one of those family drama stories about betrayal and walking away. It's about what happens when you finally stop confusing sacrifice with love and silence with peace. Don't be like me. Don't wait 16 years to ask if you matter. Don't fund someone else's dreams while your own gather dust in the corner of a life you no longer recognize. Don't tell yourself that unconditional love means accepting disrespect. Grandma stories always taught us to endure, to be patient, to give without counting the cost. But God gave us boundaries for a reason. He doesn't ask us to set ourselves on fire to keep others warm. Here's what I learned through all those family drama stories playing out in my own home. It's not about revenge. It's about recognizing the exact moment you become disposable. Those old grandma stories taught us that sacrifice equals love. But God also whispers something different: you are worthy. And sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is believe Him when He says it. Family drama stories like mine end differently when you finally choose yourself. Grandma stories say, endure. I say, know your worth first. So if you're the stepmother, the second wife, the wallet, the convenient safety net, listen carefully. You deserve more than occasional gratitude. You deserve presence, consistency, respect, a seat at the table you've been paying for all along. And if they can't see that after years of showing up, then maybe it's time to ask yourself, what am I really sacrificing for God? Put people in your life to love you, not to use you. The difference matters. I'm 61 now. I live in a small house with a front porch and a garden. I volunteer. I paint. I have friends who show up because they want to, not because they need something. And for the first time in 16 years, when I look in the mirror, I see someone who chose herself. That's not selfish. That's survival. And if my story helps even one person recognize when it's time to walk away with dignity, then every painful moment was worth it. Final note: this content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the core lessons about recognizing financial and emotional imbalance are real. If this style doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. Please seek content that better suits your needs.